Well, I think we need 4 commissioners and 3 council members.
2,
Okay.
3, well, the council's all here.
Yeah, we've got
We got
that.
4 commissioners. We got a quorum.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
All right, ready to go again?
Yeah.
Okay. Before we continue, I would just like, if you will indulge me for a second, I just want to recap and make sure that we heard you correctly. It sounds to me as if we have consensus, general consensus at least, around most of these points. I heard support for the 50% 2 or more bedrooms and 10% 3 or more bedrooms. I also heard that there may be a desire to have a higher number than that to make up for past deficits, and or maybe consider that as some sort of an incentive to have higher number than that as some kind of a bonus thing or something. I heard that all the units that are 2 or more bedroom, including 3 or more bedrooms, should be designed to be family friendly, whether they're required units or not. I heard that don't particularly want to dictate exact minimum unit sizes, and I heard that exceptions could be considered on a case-by-case basis, exceptions to any of those things. So that pretty well sums up what you all said. All right. Well, let's hope that the second half is as smooth as that. We'll see. All right, this part is about affordable housing, ownership housing, the proposed incentives, and the development bonus system, and then we'll again wrap up with discussion questions. So concerning affordable housing, this chart, which is taken from the housing element, summarizes average monthly rents in rental housing from 2000 to, I'm sorry, from the heading on this slide is wrong. It's 2010 to 2013, not 2000 to 2013. So we've had increases of 26% in the studio and 1 bedrooms and 31% in 2 bedrooms, only 12% in 3 bedrooms. However, we also did a survey of a few projects, I think 6 projects since 2013, and found that the 3-bedroom units actually had much steeper increases. I don't remember the exact 19 to 20% increases in rents in 3-bedroom units in the past, well, between 2013 and 2014. So definitely rents are going up. That's not a surprise to anybody, I don't think. We have what's called a regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, which is dictated to us from the state and Association of Bay Area Governments. Every city and county in California has this. Our current RHNA number for the next housing element cycle, which is from 2014 to 2022, 8-year period, is 1,498 units, slightly lower than 1,500 units. And that's broken down by these various income categories. So you can see about half of it is above moderate, or what we refer to as market rate, and then the other half is these breaks down by these different income categories. I would just like you to take note of these percentages over here. As we get further into the discussion, we're going to suggest that, first of all, the extremely low category should probably be provided in special projects, because this category typically requires supportive services that are usually provided in more of an institutional kind of a setting. So they're usually not intermingled with market rate units. And also, our experience indicates that the very low and low income units have often run into difficulty in ownership housing because they have no control over the HOA dues and utility costs and things like that, and they often run into financial trouble. So we suggest that in ownership housing we include moderate at a certain rate, but for rental housing, that we also include very low and low as well as moderate. And the reason why these percentage numbers over here are important is we think that they should be provided in roughly this ratio, this percentage, in order to meet our RHNA, so that a person, when they move, when their income increases, they don't get priced out, but they can't yet afford a market rate unit, but they make too much money to afford their very low income unit, then they don't have to leave the project. If it has all of the different income categories, they can just move up. So these numbers here are important to keep in mind for that reason in the future. Now, the question is often asked, well, how good a job have we done in the past of meeting our RENA obligations. And this chart attempts to address that question. This is for the last RENA period. This is information that came from the Association of Bay Area Governments. So that the last RENA period just ended this past year, 2006 to 2014. The red bar here indicates Bay Area averages, all the cities and counties in the Bay Area, and the blue is Emeryville. The total is over here on the far right. So as you can see, the Bay Area overall met about half of the RENA numbers. Emeryville met 3/4 of it. So we didn't meet 100% of our RENA, but we did better than the Bay Area average. We certainly did fine in the market rate category. We produced more than 100% of our market rate RENA, whereas overall Bay Area was about 80%. We also did pretty well in the very low income category, although not 100%. We did get about 62 or 63%, which is about twice the Bay Area average. So we did pretty decently in that category. Low and moderate, we didn't do so well. We have some work to do in those categories, and there's various reasons for that. But overall, we did better than the Bay Area in total. And I would also note that currently in the pipeline, we have probably at least 1,500 units, and that includes the ones that are under construction, which will be counted, I believe, towards the next RENA. So we shouldn't have any trouble meeting our RENA for the next 8 years. The challenge will be meeting the various income categories. So what tools do we have for affordable housing? Well, they're somewhat limited. The previous affordable housing set-aside program that we had, also known as inclusionary zoning, required 9% moderate income and 6% very low income units in rental housing projects. A recent court case called the Palmer decision means that we can no longer enforce that provision. The court determined that this was tantamount to rent control, which is basically illegal in California, at least for new projects. However, we still do have the 20% moderate rate inclusionary requirement for condominiums. The Palmer case did not affect that. Also, the elimination of redevelopment means we have less affordable housing money. As I'm sure you know, 20% of the redevelopment agency's tax increment had to go to affordable housing. Well, we don't have that resource anymore, although we still have some of the money left. But we did last year adopt an affordable housing impact fee, and that provides $20,000 per unit for rental housing, or in lieu of paying the fee, a developer can provide 6.9% of the units at low income or equivalent. We have not had any projects that have pulled permits since this fee was adopted, so we don't have any experience with it yet, but there are a number in the pipeline that will be affected by this. So one idea that staff had in order to try to get more affordable housing, since we can't legislate it any longer, at least as far as rental housing, is to have what's called a voluntary inclusionary zoning system. And that's where the developer would get a bonus, some kind of a bonus for their development, in exchange for providing more affordable units. Moving, and we'll talk about that a little more in a minute, but first, moving to the issue of ownership housing. I think, the conventional wisdom is that renters are less invested in the community than homeowners. They're transient. They move more often. They don't stick around. And that's partly because they sometimes just, get priced out. The rents increase. They have to move. But we wanted to just test that to see how true it is, and it certainly turns out it is pretty true. This regression analysis, again, of all the census tracts in the Bay Area, measures the percent of units that are renter occupied, which is along the x-axis here, versus the turnover, the annual turnover, which is measured as the percent of people who say that they moved in the past year. So that's up this axis here. And that correlation is about 0.36, so it's fairly decent correlation. Emeryville's way up here. We have about 2/3 rental households, and our annual turnover is about 31%. Now, one thing I want to point out about that, though, is that the people who say they moved in the past year are people who live in Emeryville now. That means they moved from somewhere else to Emeryville. Or maybe they moved from somewhere else in Emeryville to Emeryville. But they're moving into Emeryville, so that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when you have a population that's growing like ours is. But clearly there's a correlation between turnover and renters. Over here you have about 28% turnover when you have 100% renters, and only about 7% turnover when you have 0 or close to 0% renters. Now, there's an interesting statistic that we stumbled across, which is that the Alameda County assessor tells you what units are condominiums versus what units are not condominiums. And according to the Alameda County assessor, about 2/3 of the dwelling units in Emeryville are actually either condominiums or single-family homes, which means they could be owner-occupied. However, 2/3 of the households in Emeryville are renter-occupied. And what that implies is that a lot or a fair amount of those condominiums are actually being renter-occupied. So this is how it breaks down. We have about 38% owner-occupied condominiums and houses. We have about 23% renter-occupied condominiums and houses, and then we have about 39% renter-occupied apartments. So the green here, those are the ones that are truly rental units. The red and the blue are all units that could potentially be owner-occupied, but 23% here are not owner-occupied. This happens when individual condo owners rent their units out, or when a developer develops a condo project and then retains ownership of all the units and then rents them out and operates it as if it were a rental apartment project. I would note that as an example, Watergate, which is a condominium development of 1,249 units, 40% of that is renter-occupied. So there are some issues with ownership housing. It's not basically a panacea for citizen involvement necessarily. Many households cannot afford to own, and they're vulnerable to rent increases that may cause them to have to move. As I previously mentioned, low and very low income ownership units are prone to financial distress because of homeowners association dues, utility costs, other things like that are beyond their control and beyond their ability to pay. And we sometimes have them going into foreclosure, and if that happens and it's a BMR, a controlled BMR unit, we do run the risk of losing the BMR status for that unit. The consultant study on the school district found that families with school-aged children are attracted more to rental housing than to ownership housing, as they often cannot afford to buy. And as that pie chart indicates, building more ownership housing does not necessarily result in owner occupancy. So given all of those things, the question we would pose, I guess, and there's no right or wrong answer to this, I don't think, is what is the appropriate mix of owner and rental housing? Now moving on to the proposed incentive and bonus system. This hopefully looks familiar. This is one of the maps from the general plan. It's also incorporated into our planning regulations. This is the floor area ratio map. I'm not going to try to explain what FAR is if you're not familiar, but it's a pretty basic planning concept. And the area is mapped into these different FAR districts and by different shades of red, and the legend is over here. And as you can see, in most of those districts, there are two numbers. There's a lower number and a higher number. The lower number is what's called the base number, and that is the level that you're allowed to build to without any kind of special permission. And then the higher number is the so-called bonus number. That's the number that you can, if you get bonuses and special approval, you can build to the higher number. What staff is suggesting is that we drop these base numbers. Keep the bonus level the same, but drop the base level. And what that would do for FAR, for example, it would look like this. So like looking at the 4.0 to 6.0 FAR district as an example, currently the base is 4.0, which is here. So this is the base now. You can go up to here without any special approval, and then the bonus area is up here between 4 and 6. If we drop the base to 3 down to here, then that would become the area in which you could build without any special approval. And then the bonus would be this area up here. The area that's crosshatched would be the area that used to be base but would now require a bonus. So for all the FAR districts, we would suggest lowering the base so that you then have this area, the crosshatch area, that now would require a bonus that used to be base. Okay. I also just want to point out this little stippled area over here on the far left, which is the 0.5 FAR area. Currently, there's no bonus available in that area. We're suggesting a bonus up to 1.0. This is to address the issue in the eastern residential neighborhoods where a residential density bonus is available, but a floor area bonus is not available. And what that results in is if you get the density bonus, but there's no FAR bonus, the average unit size ends up being about 650 square feet. And this is the problem we had with the Doyle Street lofts that were approved by the City Council a couple of months ago. We were not able to allow them to have any bigger units than that because of our restrictive floor area ratio. If we add a floor area ratio bonus here, that would allow an average floor area of about 1,250 square feet if you get the density bonus in those areas, which is certainly more family friendly than a 650 square foot unit. So we're proposing to add that bonus. Height limits are similar. We propose dropping the height limit base level in these three higher categories. And similarly for residential density, we would lower the base level in these categories. What this would do is it would just capture more projects that would require a bonus. So anything that fell in this area right here that previously could have been built without a bonus would now need a bonus. It wouldn't affect a project that was already in bonus territory or one that was already in base territory. And actually, just to illustrate that, we looked at 3 hypothetical development projects to see how dropping the base level would affect them. So in this hypothetical example, the site is 1 acre, which is 43,560 square feet. The existing residential density would be 100 base to 135. This is units per acre for a bonus. And the base would be dropped to 65. The FAR, that existing is 3.0 base, 4.0 bonus, and the base would be dropped to 2.0. And the height limit, 55 feet base, 75 foot bonus currently. The base would be dropped to 40 feet. The 3 hypothetical projects, we have basically small, medium, and large. Project 1 would be 65 units, which is 65 units per acre, of course, since the site is 1 acre. That calculates to an FAR of about 1.87, assuming an average gross unit size of 1,250 square feet, and it would be 40 feet tall. Project 2 is 100 units. That calculates to an FAR of 2.87, and it's 55 feet tall. And Project 3, 135 units, FAR is 3.87 and 75 feet tall. So this is what that would look like for those 3 projects. Project 1 requires no bonus points in any category currently, and under the proposal, it would remain in the base territory, still would require no bonus points. Project 2 currently requires no bonus points. It's in that crosshatched area. But under the proposal, it would need 50 points for density, 43 for FAR, and 43 for height. The total number of bonus points needed is the highest of these 3. So in this case, it would need 50 points. Project number 3 currently needs 100 points for density, 87 for FAR, and 100 for height, so it needs 100 points. Under the proposal, it would need 100 for density, 94 for FAR, and 100 for height, so it would still need 100 points. So obviously the project that is affected by this is the medium-sized project, Project 2. Now, note the asterisk here, though. Under the proposed voluntary inclusionary zoning, both Project 2 and Project 3, in order to earn their bonus points, would now have to provide affordable and/or ownership housing, whereas currently they don't have to do that. So that's how it affects these 3 hypothetical projects. At the Sherwin-Williams study session in January, the City Council expressed interest in re-looking at the bonus point system. This is a summary of the current bonus point system. There are 18 categories, and they have a varying maximum number of points from 20 to 50. Most of them are 35. And there's also a flexible public benefit, which is unspecified, and that is as many points as the Commission or Council, as the case may be, deems appropriate. An example of that would be the 3706 San Pablo project, for which I can't remember the number of bonus points, but there were bonus points awarded by the Commission for that project because of the family-friendly, affordable nature of the overall project. The full bonus point system is attached to your staff report as attachment 2, so that's got all the details about all the regulations that apply to each of these categories and all of the subcategories that are within all of these categories. There's been a lot of discussion about this. There's a couple of points I just want to make about it. First of all, you could certainly feel free to eliminate some of these categories if you want to, or eliminate the whole thing if you want to. But it's important to understand that whatever you set as the base requirement for anything, a developer only gets bonus points if they go above and beyond that voluntarily. So it has to be beyond standard conditions of approval, environmental review mitigation measures, anything else that the city may require of the project. You don't get bonus points for that. I mean, case in point, Sherwin-Williams, they have to build all those parks. That's because it's zoned that way. They don't get points for that. So anything you have to do anyway, you don't get bonus points for. I know the electrical vehicle charging stations was an example that was brought up in Sherwin-Williams. Why should they get bonus points for that? They should do it anyway. Well, as a matter of fact, they do have to do it anyway. 3% of all parking spaces are required to be electrical vehicle charging stations. So they're going to have that. They don't get any bonus points for that. They were proposing to provide more electrical vehicle charging stations than would be required. So you can set the base requirement anywhere you want to, whatever you deem is appropriate, whatever is defensible, legally defensible, you can set that base requirement there. If they voluntarily provide more than that, then this system gives them bonus points. They don't get bonus points for something they have to do anyway. I just want to underscore that point. But like I say, this is obviously subject to whatever changes you want to make to it or elimination of it. In terms of the voluntary inclusionary zoning, well, how would that work? Bonus points for providing the public benefits would be contingent upon providing affordable and or ownership housing. In other words, that would be like a prerequisite. You have to provide a certain amount of affordable or ownership housing in your project before you'd even be eligible to get any bonus points. We could increase the number of points that are awarded in certain categories in recognition of the expense of providing affordable or ownership housing. I mean, it certainly isn't free to the developer, but at least the affordable isn't. And so in acknowledgement of the fact that they're going to have to spend some money on this, we could allow them to get more bonus points for other things. Alternatively, the public benefits, the bonus point system could just be eliminated entirely, and the bonus could be entirely based on affordable and ownership housing. For rental projects, and this is going back to that mix of RHNA numbers that I pointed out previously, staff believes that the required affordable housing, required for the bonus that is, should be a mix of very low, low, and moderate income proportional to our RHNA requirements, our RHNA obligation. For ownership projects, staff would suggest that the affordable units should be moderate income, but it should be higher than the base inclusionary requirement of 20%. They have to provide 20% moderate income anyway in an ownership project. So if they want a bonus, they should provide more than 20%. Also, ownership projects should have a requirement in the, what does this stand for? Conditions, covenants, and restrictions, I believe, CC&Rs, for homeowner association. And those should stipulate that a certain percentage of the projects be owner occupied. Alternatively, if you don't want to do that, if a condo project is operated as a rental project, in other words, they're technically condos, but the developer has retained ownership of all the units and is renting them out, then the rental affordability requirements should apply to those. And the developer could be given a choice of rental or ownership requirements. I just want to say a word about the state density bonus law, since this is something that is required by the state and it's included in our planning regulations, although it's rarely used. This does provide for density bonuses for projects that provide at least 5% very low income, 10% low income, or 10% moderate income units in a common interest development. And the maximum bonus that's available is a 35% density bonus. So in other words, if you're at 100 units per acre, you can have 135 units maximum for providing 11% very low income units, 20% low income, or 40% moderate income. And there are a lot of different tables in the state density bonus law that say exactly what percent bonus you get for exactly what percent of affordable units in the various categories. Now, the city, under the state density bonus law, must provide 1, 2, or 3 unspecified incentives or concessions, and whether it's 1, 2, or 3 depends on the percent of affordable units that are provided. There are examples of what these incentives or concessions could be, but they don't have to be that. The developer can propose any incentives or concessions that they want to propose, and the city must grant those incentives or concessions unless the city makes specific findings as to why they can't grant those incentives or concessions. So the developer, for example, could ask for an increase in FAR, or they could ask for an increase in height limit, or they could ask for a decrease in parking requirements, or a decrease in open space requirements, or an exemption from the family-friendly design guidelines, or whatever. They can ask for whatever incentives or concessions they want to ask for. And the city has to grant it unless we make specific findings. Staff would suggest that the developer be given a choice of either taking advantage of the state density bonus law or the city's new voluntary inclusionary zoning, but not both, because it gets too confusing if you're trying to do both of them simultaneously. So that's it. And for our discussion questions, should affordable housing and/or ownership housing be made a prerequisite for earning a development bonus? Should the base FAR, height, and residential density be lowered to require more projects to earn development bonuses? What's the appropriate mix of rental and ownership housing? Should all future projects be required to be ownership in order to earn the development bonuses and to sort of counter the trend towards rental housing we've had in the past? What percentage of the units at the various levels of affordability should be required for rental and ownership projects? Should this be proportional to the level of the bonus being requested? In other words, if a project needs 50 bonus points, should they be required to provide, say, half as many affordable units as a project that required 100 bonus points? And what other changes does the Commission and Council want to make to the development bonus system? So those are our questions for you. And at this point, we'll have clarifying questions from the Commission and Council. Gail.
What control, if any, do we have over the situation where someone builds a large development, maps them for condos, and retains them as rentals?
I don't think we have any control over that. I mean, I think we just have to allow that.
Well, and I think we've even sort of encouraged that in the past, so that the units could be, you know, have the option to convert to ownership in the future.
Well, right. I mean, I think what you're saying is rental projects that have been proposed, we have encouraged to map as condos.
Yes.
Right.
But then they appear in your data as
rental
units that are...
Yeah, that are actually rented. Yeah, Oak Walk is, well, actually, they did propose condos at Oak Walk, and they built condos at Oak Walk, and then they operated it as a rental project. And there's other examples like that. Yes, Diane.
So I have a question about the state density bonus system and what would be the pitfalls of a project that would fall under that bonus system rather than the guidelines that we set forth for the things that we want in our community.
You know, I'm hard pressed to answer that because in my experience in Emeryville, we've never had one. I think when I worked in Oakland, we might have had one. But at a recent meeting of Alameda County planning directors, this issue came up, and we went around the table and queried each other, and it turns out that half the cities in the county had never used it, and other cities had used it maybe once or twice. So for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be a real popular tool.
Well, here's my fear is that we're putting a lot of energy into developing a development bonus system that is going to get us what our community is asking for. And it seems to me it might be rendered toothless if there's the possibility of the state development bonus system being used.
Well, we don't have a choice there, though. We are required by state law to make the state density bonus system available. I think the key would be to craft our own so that it's more attractive.
So I guess that's the heart of my question. So how do we, as we go into this process, I would love to be guided in the direction of creating a development bonus system that is effective for our community and getting what we need, and yet still attractive enough so that we don't go down that road.
I think one point is that our bonus system would allow a bonus, say, for density. In all of these, the density bonus is virtually 100%. I mean, if you set the base at half of the bonus, you get 100% bonus, whereas the state density bonus law, the maximum bonus is 35%. So our system would allow probably a greater level of density than the state density bonus law does.
Okay, I would just love a confirmation of that,
Sure.
specifically stated, and thank you for clarifying that for me.
Jack, I think you had your hand up?
No, I'm
Okay,
fine.
Stephen?
Just a couple of questions on the slide 43, where it says that that we can still require 20% inclusionary for condos. Could this be part of the reason why we don't get condos, is that they are forced to do inclusionary, where in the rental property they don't?
Well, that's not my sense. I mean, the rental has to pay $20,000 per unit, so that's not nothing. My sense is more that the market right now just is not leaning towards condominiums. In the early 2000s, we got a lot of condominiums because that's what the market was looking for. Right now, you hear this from all cities, that in most places it's mostly rental that's being developed right now, not condominiums. I hear that from all the other planning directors. So it's not our inclusionary requirement, I don't think.
Okay. And then under the voluntary inclusion zoning about controlling the CC&Rs, that they can't reach a certain level of rentals, how do you manage that? How do you mandate that?
Well, you have to make it a condition of approval. I mean, we don't enforce CC&Rs, that's a private thing, but we can, through our conditions of approval, indicate something has to be in your CC&Rs.
And if they violate that, there's no way to find out that they're violating that, and there's no way to enforce it, is that correct?
Well, it would be a zoning violation. I mean, it would be handled the same as any other zoning violation. I mean, which is always tough.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could just add. I was going to clarify something on that anyway. So I don't know that you could enforce CC&Rs through code enforcement, but they are. I mean, they are enforceable by the HOA. So I don't think there are too many HOAs that wouldn't be interested in enforcing their own CC&Rs. But
sorry.
But I was just going to add also. I wanted to clarify something that was sort of in the staff report, which relates to this, which is that, so for new developments, that's great. We could require CC&Rs to cap the number of rentals. For existing developments, the staff report touched on that a little bit and said that there was a program to assist existing units to put these programs in place. But I wanted to say that I think it was in 2012, the state amended the Davis-Sterling Act, which is the act that governs common interest development condominiums, to say that when HOAs impose rental restrictions, they only are valid on the units that are rented at the time that they're only rented on owners who purchase their units after those requirements are in place. So it wouldn't affect any rentals right now. It would only affect future rentals.
Okay. Just on the CC&R issue, I mean, this is a legal issue that we need to explore further, but it's my understanding that if the city requires that a provision be in CC&Rs of a new project, we can enforce that. We don't want to get into the business of enforcing HOA's CC&Rs generally, but if there's a requirement in there that we made them put in there, we can enforce that get done, I believe.
But the HOA can change their CC&Rs after the fact.
Well, if they changed it to eliminate the provision that the city required, then they'd be in violation of their planning permit.
If they even knew what they were doing, yeah.
Well,
Okay, I have seen the benefits of some of these CC&Rs, like benefits from a community building viewpoint. Like, for example, at our co-op, you can only sublet for 1 year, 2 years if you have artistic necessity. After that, no, you've got to, sell and get out of there, because we want people who are not subletting. We want actual participants, meaning, you're going to be there and you want to be in our community. So that's been successful at the co-op. My mother's townhouse is a part of a CC&R agreement that has a similar effect. This is in the Chicago area. You go to rent, you can only rent to blood relatives, they say. Or you have to sell. They don't want renters. And lawyers are not challenging it. In Illinois, they got enough lawyers there. I don't know. Looks pretty good to me.
right. Well, we don't want to get too deep into the issue of CC&Rs and trying to regulate what private, homeowner associations do. But this is just a suggestion in terms of controlling rental units. Any other questions?
Is it possible to change the affordable housing requirement for condominiums so that it matches the same requirements that apartments have? Therefore, there wouldn't be a penalty for putting a condominium map on a property, so that sometime in the future they could be sold as individual units?
Well,
there's a penalty now.
You mean because it's 20%?
Yeah.
Well, but I don't know.
Excuse me. On a rental project, let me just clarify. So on a rental project that seeks to have a map approved, the current regulations provide that we can allow that, but there would be an agreement that would require to be put in place between the city and the developer that while it is being rented, even though it's subdivided into separate units, while it is being rented, it would be rented to 6.9% of the units be rented to low-income households as required, and then when they went to go to convert those units and put them on the market to sell, then 20% of the units would then be sold at moderate. That's what the obligation is currently.
So I think what you're saying is 20% sounds more onerous than 6.9%.
Right.
But there's a much deeper subsidy by the developer for a very low income unit than there is for a moderate income unit. So I don't know the exact numbers, but there are income restrictions and rental caps. They're both rental caps, and there are purchase price caps for BMR units, below market rate units. And those caps are different at the different affordability levels and for different unit sizes and for different household sizes. So the theory is that 20% moderate is roughly equivalent to 6.9% very low because of the difference in the subsidy that it involves. And for reasons that I previously said, we don't want to encourage low and very low income ownership units because those folks run into financial difficulty often. So that's why we would have a different requirement for the two.
Well, if you just allowed them the $20,000 per unit fee in lieu of the 20%.
For the condos?
Yeah.
That's possible. Whoops. But it used to be, as I said, 9% moderate and 6% very low for rental and 20% moderate for ownership. The rental got taken away from us by the courts, so we replaced that with a fee, but we didn't change the ownership. We could have the fee apply to ownership as well.
Make the floor equal for both possibilities. Otherwise, I think we're discouraging ownership development.
Well, I would say if we did impose the fee on ownership development, it would probably be similar to, for rental, it would be $20,000 per unit, or in lieu, probably 20% moderate income units. Right. So it'd be kind of
whatever, at least gives them the option.
Right. Okay.
And then but it wouldn't encourage mixing incomes within the same development. You'd be encouraging segregation.
Any further clarifying questions?
I have
Sean.
one question and one clarification that I wanted to make. So I know the city attorney already reviewed everything, but I just wanted to confirm that it was that was within state law to require an applicant to choose between the state density bonus and any other density bonus program.
We're going to
No.
need to confirm that.
I don't believe you can preclude an applicant from saying, I want to take advantage of the state density bonus law. I think our challenge here is to recognize what the state density bonus law provides. And what it does provide essentially is if they're going to take advantage of that, they have to provide the units as part of the development. And currently, we have a system that no longer in our own system doesn't allow us to make sure that those units are provided. We've had to create a system where, well, you got to pay money. And great, it's great to collect $20,000 for a unit, but that doesn't come close to creating the amount of money that you actually need to develop these types of units. And so I believe what the city is interested in is actually having the units provided. And so I think the exercise that we're trying to, that we're going through and something that we're trying to create is a recognition that the state density bonus law has been around since, I think it was initially enacted in 1978, 79, and it's been amended over time. And I don't think it's ever been used in Emeryville. But yet its results, if it is used, it results in something that we want, which is units. And so I think what we need to try to provide and what we're here for is try to create a system of our own that is perhaps more appealing to developers so that they then take advantage of our system rather than the state system, and therefore we get the units provided, not collecting a bunch of money that doesn't come close to creating the units now. So,
But to say to them, I want, so if an applicant said, I want to use the city's bonus program,
correct?
then we could say to them, then you can't use this.
Yeah, I think we can say that, but we
Okay,
can't say you can only use. You must use ours, not the state's. I mean,
No, but that was my question, is
okay.
you have to choose.
Right. I mean, I think
one or the
if
other.
we create one, we say if you use this, this is what you use exclusively.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my question. And then I just wanted to offer as clarifying information that in my day job, I've used the state density bonus twice, both in about the last 5 or 6 years, and both were for city-sponsored 100% affordable projects. So it's also my experience that market rate developers don't use that bonus very often.
Right. Any further clarifying questions? Okay, let's go to public comment then. Any public comments? Donna?
I'm Donna Briskin at 1500 Park. I'd just like to say that we really support the concept that I was hearing this morning and is in the staff report about requiring those things that are important to the city rather than giving them as bonus points. So in terms of the staff idea about should affordable housing and or ownership housing be made as a prerequisite, absolutely. We also like the idea of lowering the base. But I don't think, in my opinion, the staff hasn't gone far enough. We think we ought to lower the bonus level to what the current base level is. So not just increasing the gap, but actually lowering what density, FAR, and height could be. And I say that because when we look at the base levels for density and height particularly, which is easier for me to understand, I can relate that those are appropriate levels of density and height. 55 feet feels very comfortable in Park Avenue. 75 feet, which is the current bonus level, seems very tall for our area. So just like you were talking this morning about, well, on what basis would we make the exception to family housing? It's hard for me to envision what things would be that important that we would allow a permanent building to go in that had that much more height that was out of scale with our neighborhood. So if we do keep the bonus levels, we would ask that you require everything you can legally require rather than giving it through bonus, and that you use the bonus points in a very stingy manner, if you will, for only those things that have a long-term strategic effect for the city. Things like ownership housing or like having a shared community space for the public, but not for things like charging stations and play equipment and that. Let those be driven, and energy efficiently, let those be driven by other regulations or by competitive forces.
See, I saw over here.
Tim Curran, I'm happy to follow those comments because they were very well said. The bonus system is a very easy menu to choose from for the developers, and the results have shown that we're not getting the projects that we seem to need. And if we change the bonus system to still provide a way that the developers can achieve what they want and kind of work the system, we'll expect them to do that. But if the new system puts in regulations or requirements that serve the public benefit in a very significant way, then the developers will have to abide by that. And I think that's very necessary because as I look over the bonus points menu and see that you can achieve 100 points very easily, picking 2 items off the menu and going forward with your plan. I get worried about the future of various developments that are coming down the pike. So I want to thank you for those comments because they were excellent.
I think Paul Germain next.
Paul Germain, Emeryville Artists Cooperative. In agreement with almost everything that Donna said, probably because we had a meeting before this. The old public benefit and bonus points has one little thing at the bottom that is deemed appropriate by the Planning Commission on the City Council. I would like to see this in whatever bonus point system is arrived at by the City Council and Planning Commission, and that is the flexible public benefit that can be negotiated between the city and the developer. For example, if there was a spot for the Emeryville Celebration of the Arts that was annually provided, for example, something like that, that could be negotiated as a bonus point, and or even Center for the Art, which we no longer have a building for. Thank you.
I lived in Berkeley in a lovely home on a road that was one of 3 routes to get to the University of California. And the City Council in Berkeley, in its wisdom, developed an excellent traffic management plan which diverted the traffic from 2 of those roads onto the road in front of my house. The fact that City Council people lived on those other 2 roads may have been a factor, I don't know. It actually was the logical place in my opinion, but the point is in the trying to create a public benefit in a better city, they ruined our neighborhood. And that neighborhood today is occupied by people who have bought, Hong Kong residents have bought 2/3 of the houses. They don't live there. They're empty places to visit when you come. So when I think about these issues, I think about how do you define public? Because I'm passionate about solar power. I'm passionate about charging stations. But is it appropriate to flood our neighborhood with traffic or create walls of too great height shadowing over our building so that the world's a better place. And I think it's really, we have to try to find a balance between what is good for a specific neighborhood, what is good for a community, what is good for the world, and try to find those balances somehow. So I love the idea of this discussion so far this morning of saying there are things that we really want in this city. And those aren't bonus points, those are prerequisites. You want to build in this city, that's what you do. That's what our city wants. And you don't get to go above the normal guideline for height or above the normal guideline for density. That's the way it is. That's a prerequisite. And so then I think lowering the base is a brilliant idea. It gives you much more discretion, much more influence on the direction you want to go. I would suggest, personally, that the old levels of the old base level would be a great new ceiling, not the current ceiling, because I think the current ceilings are too high, frankly, for some neighborhoods at least. Maybe along Powell Street, great height is okay, but there's certain neighborhoods where I don't think it's appropriate. I think that the idea of including public space, that's an example of something that would benefit a specific neighborhood. It would enhance the value of that neighborhood. There are other things like that I think the neighborhood would appreciate having those things, and therefore would give up some other things to have. But we want to have. I think that's the question. Is think about a bonus system that is appropriate to a neighborhood by neighborhood approach.
Thank you. Any further public comments over here?
I am Jack Gitzani from 1500 Park Avenue also. I wanted to second what was said by Donna and the gentleman in front of her regarding sensitivity to heights and neighborhoods, because I think that the neighborhood that I'm in, the fundamental characteristic with the heights that seem to be permissible now would really change the neighborhood in a way that's not very desirable. And on major corridors, it's one thing, but that is a little pocket on the edge without a lot of ingress and egress for traffic. If you have a lot of density, you have a lot of height, you have a completely different neighborhood. And I think the people that currently live there would not like it to change in that way. And I think that sort of regional sensitivity needs to be part of the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Now over here.
So speaking to the discussion questions, just had comments on a few of them. The first question, making it a prerequisite affordable housing, I think absolutely affordability should be required as a bonus. We lost the opportunity to include that in the Palmer case, but I think that, you know, the exception that was very much made clear in that decision was that you can bargain for the implementation of an inclusionary ordinance as part of handing out any entitlement or bonus. And I think that the only way to guarantee that we build as we go is to make that a necessity here. To the question about lowering base, I support lowering base for some of the reasons my neighbors have articulated. The suggestion, the caveat I would make to that, though, is not necessarily constricting the opportunities developers have. I think that when a planning commission has to consider what proposals before it, they want to have as much flexibility above it. What I would suggest instead is that the number of bonuses that are available to them and the types of them is restricted greatly from the current list we have. Almost half of these things, if not more of them, I think should actually be requirements that should be built into the planning guidelines as necessities to putting a proposal forward to that level. And I think that you can restructure some of the remaining things to reflect what you're actually trying to get at. You know, there's a couple other things in here that maybe aren't appropriate for right now, but I would just put on the table as things that should be considered. One of them is the impact fee itself. To be honest with you, $20,000 doesn't come close to the cost of putting an affordable unit together if you're an affordable developer. They average about $110,000 to $120,000 a door, and it's probably more in Emeryville because of we're above the mean on that. And so, you know, to the question that one planning commissioner, my friend Buzz, asked, you know, about whether we should try to mirror between condos and rental, I would actually discourage that suggestion here, because giving a for-profit developer a $20,000 out as opposed to mandating 20%. 20% of those units at $120,000 each is a lot more significant than letting them pay $20,000 at the door for those units. So I would actually not recommend that. And then just making sure we have other ordinances in place. I mean, we have, I heard the city attorney say, and I appreciate that with the condo owner who rents the units, we require when they turn those over and convert them into ownership units, we have a contract with them, which is what we should have, obviously, and making sure those units remain affordable when they're sold. But for one that's not in that structure, where it's a full rental, it goes through maybe 10 years as a rental property and it converts over, we need ordinances that protect any units that are affordable to the right of first refusal, that basically ensure that those, it looks like the city attorney's going to tell me we have that.
We have a condo conversion ordinance
Awesome.
that
I
deals
love
with
that.
those issues.
That's it.
All right, any further public comments? Back here, Miru.
Good afternoon, Bruce Dorfman with the Sherwin-Williams Project. Someone brought up about, I guess, more regional issues, and I think I'd like to second a thought here, which is Emeryville's in a unique position where for every 5 or 6 jobs that it has in the city, it has 1 housing unit. Right now in the Bay Area, we're creating 1 housing unit for every 6 new jobs. There's really a issue here, and I'm just concerned that some of these elements that are being discussed are going to have the unintended consequences of forcing or encouraging new development that is lower density and consequently not meeting the bigger picture, the bigger needs that the city has. In the past, I think that the bonuses were on a discretionary basis, and we anticipated that that was going to be a negotiation with the City Council and the Planning Commission. It would seem that with the focus right now on certain specific issues, that perhaps it would be better for the community if it was more a formulaic approach, so that both the city and the developers knew specifically what they could design to in order to meet the direction that the city's providing. Thank you.
All right, any further public comment? Oh, all right, let's bring it back to the commission and council. Sean.
Charlie, excuse me. Can I just couple points. First, this the bonus system, as it's currently crafted, it applies not just to residential development, but it applies to commercial, industrial, etc. So I'm not sure if we are talking about just merely revising it as to residential development, or whether you're anticipating that it gets revised for all types of development. So that's just sort of a question that you got to mull over. And then the other thing I just wanted to point out, and it's in the staff report, that as we talk about, if the direction is that we're going to look at lowering the base, one of the things we need to look at and analyze as part of that work product that we eventually come back to the commission and council with is making sure that our housing element that is developed to meet our RENA numbers, that we're not undermining our ability to do that by making these revisions. So there needs to be an analysis of the effect of what we're proposing on the housing element. So, okay.
We finished with public comments. We're back to the commission now. Does the commission wish to entertain, and council wish to entertain, any further public comment?
Is there?
You already spoke. Want to speak for one more minute?
Yeah, you can see.
I'm not going to advocate that.
Yes.
Oh. Charlie, this is a math question. If the requirement is $20,000 per unit in lieu of affordable, and that were applied to a 20% requirement for affordable housing, would that translate? Wouldn't that translate into about $100,000 equivalent for a new unit? In other words, is that the math that John? If it's $120,000 to produce a new unit, and 20% of a project was going to have to be affordable, therefore, do you divide 5 into the 120 and get the
$120,000.
Maybe you all can have a private conversation after the meeting. I think you're kind of mixing up a couple of different concepts. That's why I asked. Yeah, okay. Okay, back to the council and commission. Sean.
So I have a lot of comments on this portion of the presentation. So I wanted to kind of jump out in front.
Oops, your time's up. Sorry.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Mark. Have a very good time.
I have several comments which I hope will provide some insight and kind of frame the discussion. First, I want to make some general comments, which is that I just want to point out, as I do at every opportunity, that we did, as the statute, that we did have a really good tool for providing affordable housing in redevelopment areas, and now that is gone, and the state has not replaced it, and so now a lot of communities are struggling with how to replace those funds, and it's a very unfortunate situation that we're in. I was sort of struck by the table that showed the RENA numbers and the housing production in the Bay Area, and I was actually really surprised by the above moderate category that shows that Emeryville has provided more than its RENA share, but that the region has provided less than 100% of the RENA allocation, which means one of two things to me. It means either the RENA allocation is not accurately reflecting the demand for those units, or it means that that we're not permitting units to meet the demand. And that speaks to the report that Commissioner Keller sent us from the Legislative Analyst's Office, which does speak to really the regional problem that we have. And that is another unfortunate thing, I think. Then I also wanted to talk just briefly about renter-occupied condo units. It's been my observation that so I think condo buildings and apartment buildings are built with different sets of amenities and different sets of programs and things like that. I think we do have some interest in ensuring that condo buildings remain ownership and perhaps even rental buildings remain rental. For example, condo buildings are typically built without a means of providing on-site management all of the time. Especially in smaller buildings, without a lot of the same amenities that are provided in apartment buildings. And so when individual condo units are rented out, without things like on-site management and things like that, it can create a lot of problems. So I just wanted to say that. So now I'll kind of get to some of my more specific comments. So I wanted to talk a little bit about overall kind of this changing of the bonus scheme. I will say in general, even as a planner, I've always not loved floor area ratio as a metric. It's a really hard one sometimes to get your head around, and I think at times it doesn't always provide us with the kind of development that we want. So you might say, the goal is to provide kind of open space on a site. Well, the floor area ratio doesn't say what that space that's not occupied by a building has to be. So it could be, it could be a street, or it could be a parking lot, or it could be landscaping, or it could be a lawn, or it could be hardscape, or it could be a variety of things. To me, density and height are the metrics that I can definitely get my head around more. So I've not really reconciled the relationship between the height, especially, and the floor area ratio, and whether those are in sync now, and whether they would be in sync with the proposed changes to them. So I'm mostly going to comment on height because that's something I can sort of get my head around. So then I will also say the conversation of lowering the, basically the base, what's allowed, the base level and the bonus, is sort of one that starts to make me uncomfortable. I think in, kind of the history of zoning, we've, usually you zone for what you want. So you allow the maximum that you want, you allow the minimum that you want, you allow, all these different things. What this is saying, so the term that is used a lot these days, that's kind of a buzzword, is land value recapture. So what we're trying to say now is we are creating increased land value by raising the allowed height and doing all of these things to allow more intense development. How do we recapture some of that value that we're adding to the property? Which on the surface seems to make sense, except that you're now creating this threshold for a bonus, which is a barrier, which is an obstacle. So the risk you run is that your projects are not going to want to cross that threshold. It's more likely, this has always been a risk, always with sort of Euclidean zoning, you establish a maximum, maximum density, whatever. And there's always the risk that you might, if that maximum density is what you get, is what you want, that you might get something less than that. And that's still the risk, but now we're creating this extra hurdle. So, we're going to bump right up until to that line of where you need a bonus, and it's more likely that projects are not going to jump over that hurdle. And so we're going to get something that's less than what we ultimately want, is my concern. And so then I will say also, we need to be thinking about the limitations in terms of construction type. I think that's one key piece of information that's missing here, and my expertise will allow me to kind of fill in some of that. But if anybody else has any, can add anything else, please do. And but basically, so right now what we're getting obviously is a lot of wood frame construction over reinforced concrete bottom base podium, if you will. And there's some debate in, amongst different cities as to what the kind of the maximum for that is that's allowed right now. The building code isn't completely, the current California building code is not completely explicit on it. So my understanding is Emeryville's building official's interpretation is a 2-story podium is basically 5 stories of wood frame over a 2-story podium, which by my calculation is about 80 feet. You get about 24 feet for the podium, 55 feet for the wood frame, about 80 feet. So housing is going to be constructed, I think Jennifer West was here earlier, but I think she left. She and I went to a great seminar, I forget who put it on, a few years ago, and one of the speakers talked about how developers construct parking, and housing is constructed mostly the same way. So if I can kind of give an illustration, parking is constructed not by number of spaces, but by levels. If you're constructing it in structured parking, so you wouldn't add half a level of parking. You would add a full level of parking because of the cost benefit of doing that. So housing construction is going to happen much the same way, where you're going to add an entire floor to your building. So I think we need to be thinking about this. And as I looked at the heights, they kind of made sense to me. 40 feet, I think I calculated 40 feet was about like 3 stories of wood frame over a 1-story podium, which now, in this current market seems to be not a very desirable model. So I think in that case, we would get a bonus. But what I also wanted to say is that we need to be thinking about the affordable housing requirement in terms of that as well. For example, if you had a building that had, say, 20 units on each floor, and and you bumped right up against that bonus threshold, and then by adding the bonus and adding the extra height, you were then required to build 20 more units, most developers are not going to build an extra floor of building that has to be all affordable housing units, right? It only makes sense to do that if you get a bonus beyond what, you know, the affordable housing that would be then required by the bonus. So I just kind of wanted to frame things in terms of that.
All right, thank you. Other comments? Nora, then
I have a
Scott.
question, Charlie. On this public benefits and bonus points, if we go down through this list, which of these could be transferred into the regular permitting process before the Planning Commission? What I have heard from the public and from other members of the council is that this is an obsolete bonus point. Some of these things on here we should be requiring as a condition of approval. And my question to you is, if you go down this list, which of these can we do that with without a problem? Legal problem.
Well, as I tried to emphasize at the outset, and this point doesn't seem to be getting across, this is over and above what is normally required. You only get bonus points if you do more than what the city already requires. So some of these things are already required, like public art. We have a 0.5% for art requirement for residential and 1% for art for non-residential projects. You only get bonus points in public art if you provide more than that, say 2% or 3%. And EV charging stations are also required. You only get bonus points if you provide more than what's required. Significant structures, we have a system in place that says you've got to get city council approval to demolish a significant structure. This gives you bonus points for incorporating it into your project, but we could eliminate that on the knowledge that if you don't incorporate it in your project, the city council has to approve its demolition. So I would say we'd have to go through it case by case. I would say about half of these, maybe not half, maybe a third of these are already required. It's just they get bonus points if they go above that requirement.
To what extent? If your level is so low that they can come in and get bonus points, let me give you the electric charging stations as a case in point. If you're only requiring 2 or 3 in a big development, that shouldn't be the rubric. It should be on the percentage of parking spaces.
It is 3%.
But is that high enough?
Well, that's based on state guidelines, and that's where we got it from. We could increase these requirements. I mean, we could eliminate all of these bonus categories and take a look at what our base requirement for all of these things is and make sure those are appropriate, if that's what you want to do.
I misunderstood what I heard from planning commissioners and council members, but I thought that was the direction that we wanted to move in. That these are relative, some of these bonus points are obsolete in the context of what we want to do now and what we want to do going forward.
Right. I mean, if the main focus is going to be on family-friendly, affordable, and or ownership housing, and that's all you want to give bonuses for, then maybe we just eliminate all of these.
Well, the thing here is we again have to separate out. We're just talking about affordable housing, family-friendly housing here. This also includes commercial.
Correct.
That's a separate issue here.
Correct. I mean, we do have a housing impact fee for commercial development. We could tailor it so that development bonuses for non-residential development require an additional affordable housing fee or something, I would think, if we wanted to do that. Just a thought. Yes, Brad.
I mean, and this is just responding to the, I mean, I sort of went through it, and it seemed to me that about half of the items here either are already requirements or they could easily be requirements, at least to a certain threshold, you know, or base level.
Right.
Everything from, I mean, I would encourage us to have a requirement of LEED silver maybe a 15% energy, for the Title 24.
Well, one thing I would say about the energy efficiency, this is challenging because it's a moving target. The state building code keeps upping the ante on energy efficiency to the point where pretty soon you're not going to be able to get any bonus points regardless of what our system says because it's already required by the state.
Yeah. Or even if you do LEED silver, I think that might require, or at least one of the ways many people, one of the points that a lot of people go for in that is the 15% above the requirement for the energy efficiency.
Let me just give you one example. Now we have, and I also want to underscore that we have had very few projects approved under this system so far, so we don't have a really good database of experience to draw on here in terms of what developers are going to choose to use. But the utility undergrounding is something that, to me, has great benefit to the city to get those wires out of the air. But legally, we cannot require a developer to underground the utilities except right in front of their property, except along their building frontage. If a developer voluntarily says, I'll underground the whole street, or I'll underground 2 blocks on either side of my project, we can't require that. If they choose to do it, we can say, oh, all right, you get some bonus points. I mean, to me, that's a pretty clear example of where this would come in. If you take that category away, then they're never going to offer to do that. I haven't heard anybody offering to do that anyway, so because it's very expensive, so maybe it's not such a loss.
Well, and that one is only, the way I read it is it's provided into a fund, so that would only be...
Oh, is that what it says?
Yeah, so
No.
that would only work if we got a few projects that provided enough to actually underground somewhere.
Yeah,
Wait a
okay.
minute. If a utility undergrounding is a condition of approval, we're not talking about little residential lots. We're talking about big parcels. And if you underground, say Hollis Street from Powell Street down to where that property stops at Stanford, that's a big deal. If they have to underground everything on the...
Oh yeah, I'm not saying it isn't.
And
No,
that
we
should
do.
be a condition of approval.
It is.
Shouldn't be
It
a
is.
bonus.
It is. No, it is. If they do it in front of their own project as a condition of approval, they don't get any bonus points for that. It's only if they would voluntarily do it beyond that. So, for example, the Glass House project, there's no wires on Hollis Street in front of the Glass House project, but there are north and there are south. If they had volunteered to underground down to Ocean Avenue or 62nd Street or something, they should get some credit for that because we cannot require that.
I think it's worth it for us to go through each of these categories so we know what's required and where the threshold over it, because it's clear we don't have a common understanding of each of these things, and then we can weigh in on that.
Can the planning commission do that and send their recommendations to the council? We got 10 minutes.
Maybe that's one way to go, but I do think I know I have a lot to say about how to tweak our density bonus system. And just Brad, off of your LEED silver thing, the city council recently heard a status report on our climate action plan, and we're not getting the overall reductions that we need to meet our climate action goals. So I think sustainable design and alternative energy can be consolidated. Like if a building has a 0 carbon footprint, because not every building they get bonus points for being carbon neutral. And anything short of being carbon neutral, it's like, well, they should just be efficient anyway. But I don't know. We could get really bogged down just on this bonus system and not talk about some of these other issues about affordability and ownership.
Okay, Jack?
I just want to co-sign on to what Ruth is saying. I think that, and
Can you speak into the mic, please?
And Nora too, right? That maybe the Planning Commission could go through this, but also I'd like to say that right now, the menu, people look at it in context, right? And so they will pick the thing that has the lowest barriers or is the cheapest to do. And it's like a menu from the Cheesecake Factory. Too many possibilities, too many things here, and they weigh one against the other. So as the Planning Commission looks at this, I would really like to see it targeted, right, and a very slim menu of options.
I would just anecdotally note that when we were developing this bonus system a couple of years ago, as some of you will recall, people were throwing in all kinds of things that they wanted. We're like, okay, we'll add that.
That's right.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just going in that same direction. This could be a really, really lengthy discussion, and I think we have a parallel track that we're here for about the affordability, the ownership, and the mix of those prerequisites or requirements.
Yeah. Can you throw up those questions?
I'm sorry. Sure.
Just weigh in on that. Thank you. Who wants to take a crack at answering these questions here? Sit around this table.
Scott.
Should affordable housing and or ownership housing be made a prerequisite for earning development bonus? Yes.
All right.
Should the base...
Scott.
That's a good idea.
Yes.
Anybody else agree with that? Looks like all hands up. Okay.
Good thought, Jack.
Should the base FAR height and residential density be lowered to require more projects to earn development bonuses? Yes.
I do have a qualifier on that one.
Okay.
That you mentioned adding bonuses to where there are not currently bonuses is the residential single-family sort of area. I don't remember the exact zoning, but I mean, I witnessed a 3,000 square foot house being built on a 3,000 square foot lot, which is a floor area ratio of 1. Because I think they got bonuses before the bonuses were taken away from that, or I'm not quite sure, but it fills up the entire lot and it's an eyesore for the neighbors adjacent to it. So I think a 0.5 in a single family residential area is not overly restrictive. I don't know.
Well, it's just that it doesn't match the residential density bonus. I mean, we could take away the residential density bonus, so you don't have the option of going to 35 units per acre. But I would also note that hopefully some of these atrocities wouldn't happen in the future, because first of all, the bonus up to 1.0 would be discretionary. It would have to be approved by the Planning Commission. They'd have to like the design in order to approve it. And we do have design guidelines, not just the family-friendly, but we have a whole slew of other design guidelines that talk about how buildings have to look and shape and relate to the street and relate to each other and all that sort of thing. So if they comply with the design guidelines and the Planning Commission likes the project, they can decide whether or not they want to give them the 1.0 density bonus. Or you could just not have it at all.
And I just have a question on that. Do we have a area in town that's zoned single resident only?
No.
So all of these places could have a granny flat or triplex or...
Oh yeah, we're talking about the Triangle neighborhood here and the Doyle Street neighborhood here, primarily. And in those districts, the base density is 20 units per acre, which in some communities is their highest density neighborhoods. And 2 units per lot are allowed by right. And then above that, you need to get, some kind of permit. So, right. Was that it on your comments? So, Scott, did you want to keep going?
I want to keep going. I want to drop down to the last one first, which is what other changes to development bonus point system are desired? Well, this relates to what Brad was talking about earlier, that in larger developments, when you get up to more than 150 people, there'll be a different section of the building requiring some kind of separate access, so that we're in effect creating 150 people or less sections within large developments. Something like this, maybe this idea has to be worked on, but that would be a bonus, some number of bonus points for creating sub-communities within larger developments that would go towards family-friendly design.
On that point, Catherine was just reminding me that the guidelines document, I guess was it the one that was prepared by staff for the EAH development, or whatever that is, that includes a provision like that to break projects, big projects up into smaller projects. And I guess that was originally included in our family-friendly design guidelines and got eliminated for some reason.
So the research that was done that we did a few years ago about on affordable housing projects was talking about creating community within smaller communities within larger projects, and the idea, the concept is actually around security, so only certain people have access to certain areas, and then those areas have some sort of communal space, some sort of space that is only accessed by that smaller community. There's research on this, and we'll review that research on how to best create community in a multifamily, smaller communities in multifamily.
We do, I believe the guidelines still have that provision about access in certain restricted areas.
There's a provision that says in large projects, consider dividing them into parts that have exclusive access to the common areas of those residents. And we were focused on security. So what, in the way we wrote that. But it sounds like what Brad was talking about was more how the project is designed, so that there's a bunch of units that face on a courtyard.
30 seconds we've just gone over, I'll call it community, sub-community unit, subdivision.
Yeah, okay.
Bonus points, yes.
Take on a suburban
Okay.
And just, the overall concept, it sounds like we're all on the same page that this needs to be, this is hours of discussion with regard to revamping the bonus point system. But
It sounds like the council wants to defer to the commission for those hours of discussion. Do you want to tackle the issues of mix of rental and ownership and the various affordability levels?
I don't want to tackle that right now.
I don't know how we tackle it at this point in this amount of time.
Anybody else?
I think we really do need to try to get the distribution of the low, very low, moderate, all of those things in a better balance, because clearly we're doing well in some areas and failing miserably in others.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point.
The voluntary inclusionary zoning seems very promising.
Okay.
But only if it's attractive, right? Only if people want to opt in.
Well, it will take some further thought to figure this out, to craft it, I think.
Voluntary part.
Yeah, right. No,
You'll notice this section was not as well, I don't want to say as well thought out, but wasn't as finely tuned as the first section was, which was really just numbers. Which number do you want to pick?
It's much more finesse.
Yes, yeah.
You did good, Charlie.
Thanks.
All right,
Any further comments from the commission or council?
One of the things is, in terms of an ownership project that should come online, that would be governed by CC&Rs. I know that there are some HOAs that are revamping their CC&Rs now to require, when units sell, that they be owner occupied for at least 5 years. And I used to live in an HOA condo complex here in town where the percentage of renters just kept creeping up to the point where it affected mortgages and the lending environment for these condo complexes. So I think we can say, at least at the start, that when CC&Rs are created, they provide a residency, initial residency requirement. And then if an owner later on down the line wants to move and rent out their unit, they wouldn't be prohibited, but at least at the point of sale and for the short-term future, it would be owner occupied.
Here, here.
And then we can also cap what the rental amount could be as
I
well
like
as that.
that,
So,
Steve.
so
Yeah.
you have 5 years, it has to be renter occupied. After that, 50% of the unit still has to be renter occupied or owner occupied during the duration of the project.
Well, you can't control that.
You could put it in the CCNRs. We can.
Yeah, well, who are you going to prohibit from
Yeah.
moving?
It's like what, at once the first 50%
Yeah.
are established,
Yeah,
and
that I
the
know
rest are
about.
out of
Yeah,
luck.
you know,
That was the option.
Getting into a bag of
That
worms.
was the
Yeah.
option.
You really want to do that.
Okay, I sense a desire to get out of here. So, let me just quickly mention next steps. So next Wednesday at 6 p.m., the Housing Committee will be taking this issue up. They're getting the same report that you all got today. I doubt they're going to spend 4 hours on it. I certainly hope not. The City Council will be considering the family-friendly design guidelines at your meeting on May 19th. Then we will be trying to flesh all of this out that you've given us direction on today. Planning Commission consideration of the revised planning regulations and general plan amendments will be happening hopefully in May or June, and council consideration then would follow in June or July, and those amendments would take effect 30 days after final passage by the council. Okay?
Well,
So, thank you. Thank you.
with that, I want to thank the public for coming out, and for those of you who stuck through to the end of a 4-hour meeting on a Saturday. And I'm glad to see our postcards work, that that when we notify people of this. But we don't get together as a collective body very often, and it's very valuable when the commission and the city council do meet. I want to thank the staff for extensive preparation.
Thank you.
I want to thank.
Grab a sandwich on your way out.
I also want to make note that we made this meeting more accessible by having childcare.
Yes,
and
thank you.
it was used, and that is a little bit of modeling what we want by way of a family-friendly community. So with that, this was a great discussion, and let's get together some other time. Meeting's adjourned.